Khabib Nurmagomedov was born on September 20th, 1988, in the small village of Sildi, in the mountains of Dagestan. The village sat high above sea level, surrounded by stone and silence, far from the noise of cities and the rush of the world. Life in Sildi was simple. Mornings came early. Winters were long. Summers were short and dry. Children learned to work before they learned to dream, and families depended on discipline more than comfort. Khabib's father, Khabib Nurmagomedov, was already known in the region as a wrestling coach. He believed that sport was not entertainment, but education. It was a way to teach patience, respect, and control long before it taught victory. When Khabib was young, the family moved to Makashkala, the capital of Dagestan. Their home was small, but it was always full of people. Wrestlers, students, and fighters trained in the gym that Abdulmanap built inside the house. Mats covered the floor. The sound of bodies hitting the ground became part of daily life. Khabib grew up inside that gym. At first, he watched. Then he played. Then he trained. Wrestling was introduced before schoolwork. Discipline came before praise. When Khabib made mistakes, his father corrected him without anger and without comfort. The lesson was always the same: learn, repeat, improve. As a child, Khabib trained in wrestling, judo, and sambo. His days followed a strict rhythm: school in the morning, training in the afternoon, more training in the evening. There was little time for anything else. At home, his father told him stories of Dagestani wrestlers who had gone on to become champions. These were not stories of fame. They were stories of sacrifice, of men who trained while others slept, of men who stayed calm when others panicked. Khabib listened carefully. In the cold winters, training moved indoors. In the summers, they ran hills and trained outside. The ground was hard. The air was thin. Every session tested endurance more than strength. By the time he was a teenager, Khabib had already competed in local wrestling tournaments across Dagestan. He rarely lost, not because he was the strongest, but because he refused to stop. He learned how to break opponents slowly, patiently, without giving them space to breathe. When he was introduced to combat sambo, something clicked. The style combined everything he had learned: wrestling, control, pressure, discipline. Khabib began to dominate competitions, winning Russian and world-level tournaments while still in his early 20s. But at that time, fighting was not a career. It was simply part of life. The cage was still far away. The lights did not exist yet. All that existed was training, family, and the quiet certainty that he was being prepared for something bigger, even if he did not yet know what it was. In Makashkala, the Nurmagomedov home never truly slept. The doors were always open. Wrestlers came in at all hours of the day, carrying bags, carrying fatigue, carrying ambition. Some stayed for weeks. Some stayed for years. They slept on floors, on couches, wherever there was space. The house was not a home in the usual sense. It was a place of work. For Khabib, this was normal. He woke to the sound of bodies hitting mats and fell asleep to quiet conversations about technique and discipline. His childhood was shaped by the rhythm of training. There was no separation between family and sport. They were the same thing. Abdulmanap believed that a champion was built through environment, not talent, so he created one. Khabib trained every day, often alongside men much older and stronger than him. He lost often in the beginning. He was thrown, pinned, and exhausted until his arms shook and his lungs burned. His father never intervened. Losing was part of the lesson. Surviving was the goal. Slowly, Khabib learned how to stay calm under pressure. He learned how to breathe when someone heavier pressed down on his chest. He learned how to wait for mistakes instead of forcing openings. These lessons would stay with him forever. By his teenage years, Khabib's life was already structured around sport. School existed, but training came first. When other boys played games in the street, he ran hills or drilled takedowns. When others rested, he repeated movements until they became instinct. Combat Sambo became his focus. It demanded complete control, standing, clinch, ground. There was no escape from weakness. Every gap was exposed. Khabib loved it because it punished impatience. He began winning regional competitions, then national ones. His name started to circulate quietly in Russian fighting circles. Not because he was flashy, but because he was impossible to move once he touched you. At home, his father remained the same. Victories were acknowledged with a nod. Losses were discussed calmly. There were no celebrations, no excuses. When Khabib won the Russian Combat Sambo Championship, the moment passed without ceremony. Training resumed the next morning. In 2008, at 20 years old, Khabib fought professionally for the first time. The event was small, the crowd thin, the venue forgettable. He won quickly, the same way he always did. Pressure, takedown, control, finish. The cage felt strange at first. The gloves were different. The rules were new. But the feeling was familiar. A man trying to escape. A man running out of energy. A man learning that there was nowhere to go. Khabib won again, and again, and again. He fought across Russia and Ukraine, collecting victories quietly, building a record that no one outside the region noticed yet. Each fight was another lesson, another step. There was no talk of the UFC, no talk of fame. The world was still very small, but the foundation was already set, and it was strong enough to carry him anywhere. As Khabib's record grew, so did the distance from home. Fights took him across Russia, into unfamiliar cities and unfamiliar gyms, where the language changed, but the pressure did not. He traveled with little more than a bag and his discipline. The routine came with him everywhere, steady and unbreakable. Early in his career, Khabib fought wherever he was invited. Promotions were small. Venues were modest. The crowds were loud but unimportant. What mattered was experience. Each fight taught him how to stay calm in chaos, how to adapt to different styles, how to remain patient when things did not go as planned. He began to face opponents who were larger, stronger, more aggressive. Some tried to overwhelm him early. Others tried to avoid him altogether. None succeeded. Once Khabib closed the distance, the fight belonged to him. By 2009, he had become a regular competitor in Russian and European promotions. His record remained perfect. More importantly, his confidence grew without turning into arrogance. He knew his strengths, but he also knew his weaknesses, and he worked on them quietly. In 2010, Khabib entered the world of high-level combat Sambo. That year, he won the Combat Sambo World Championship. He would win it again the following year. These victories mattered deeply to him and his father. Sambo was not just a sport. It was proof that their system worked. During this time, Khabib met another young fighter named Islam Makhachev. They trained together, pushed each other, and shared the same discipline. Their bond was built in training rooms, on long runs, and in silence. They were not rivals. They were brothers in work. Khabib's style began to fully form. Pressure without panic, control without haste. Every fight looked the same, because every fight was the same. He brought opponents into his world and kept them there. By 2011, whispers began to circulate outside Russia. Scouts noticed the undefeated record. Coaches watched the footage. Promoters asked questions. Slowly, the door to the wider world opened. When the call finally came from the UFC, it did not arrive with celebration. Abdulmanap listened, nodded, and said only one thing: prepare. Khabib did not smile. He did not tell anyone. He went to training, because the journey away from home was not about destination. It was about being ready when the world finally came to him. In late 2011, the call became real. The UFC offered Khabib a contract, and with it came a new level of expectation. This was the biggest stage in the world, the place where the best fighters tested themselves. For many, it would have been a dream fulfilled. For Khabib, it was simply the next step. He traveled to the United States for the first time with little fanfare. New country, new language, new culture. Everything felt loud and fast, but he moved through it the same way he moved through a fight, slowly, carefully, without reaction. His debut was scheduled for January 2012. The opponent was a veteran, experienced and confident. Analysts expected a tough fight. They did not yet understand what pressure felt like when it never stopped. When the cage door closed, the world narrowed. Khabib's mind went quiet. The plan unfolded exactly as it always had. He closed the distance, took the fight to the ground, and controlled every second of it. The win came by submission, and it came easily. The crowd reacted with surprise. Khabib did not. Backstage, he changed, stretched, and left. The fight was already finished in his mind, filed away as another step completed. His second fight came later that year, and the result was the same. Pressure, control, no escape. A decision win that felt more like a lesson than a contest. Commentators began to take notice. They spoke about his wrestling, his composure, his pace. But Khabib was not interested in commentary. He returned to Dagestan to train. The gym was the same. The mats were the same. His father's expectations were the same. UFC wins did not change the rules of the house. In 2013, Khabib faced stronger competition. Each fight lasted longer, tested him more, demanded patience. He won every time, but not without effort. He learned that the UFC was a place where mistakes were punished quickly, and he adjusted quietly. Then, in 2014, his body forced him to stop. A knee injury required surgery. Training stopped. Fighting stopped. The routine that had defined his life was suddenly gone. Recovery was slow, frustrating, unfamiliar. He could not run. He could not wrestle. He could only wait. Waiting was harder than fighting. But discipline carried him through again. Rehab became training. Rest became work. He returned to the gym slowly, carefully, rebuilding the body the same way he had built everything else. When he returned to the cage, he did not look different. He looked the same. And that was when the world began to understand. This was not a fighter chasing success. This was a system that could not be broken. Recovery teaches a different kind of discipline. For Khabib, the months after surgery felt endless. His knee healed slowly, and patience became harder than any training session. He watched others fight while he waited, listened to the world move forward without him, and learned how to stay still when everything inside wanted to move. Each day followed a new routine: stretching, therapy, strength work, walking before running, running before wrestling. Every step forward was measured, careful, deliberate. His father watched closely, reminding him that rushing would cost more than waiting. In the gym, he trained around the injury, not through it. Upper body drills, technique without pressure, mental preparation without physical strain. He studied fights, not to entertain himself, but to learn. He learned how others reacted under stress, how they wasted energy, how impatience created openings. When his body finally allowed him to return fully, he did not feel excitement. He felt relief. In 2016, Khabib returned to the UFC cage after nearly 2 years away. The world had changed. New contenders had risen. The division had shifted. Some questioned whether he would be the same. He answered without words. The fight was one-sided. Pressure returned. Control returned. The rhythm that defined him came back, as if it had never left. The injury did not slow him. It clarified him. Fight by fight, he rebuilt his momentum. Each performance looked calmer than the last. He no longer fought to prove anything. He fought to demonstrate consistency. The fans began to notice something different. He did not chase finishes. He created them. He did not rush exchanges. He absorbed them. His pace felt endless, his patience unshakable. But the road back had cost him time. Others held belts now. Others filled headlines. Khabib did not care. The only thing that mattered was staying healthy, staying disciplined, staying ready. Behind the scenes, his father prepared him for the moment he knew would come. A title shot would arrive, but only if Khabib stayed patient. Only if he stayed whole. So he trained and waited and stayed ready. Because the long road back had taught him something simple and permanent. Nothing is given back all at once. Everything is earned again, slowly. By 2017, the division could no longer ignore him. Khabib's record remained perfect. Every fight added pressure to the question everyone was asking, but few could answer. Who could stop him? The question followed him into interviews, into training camps, into quiet moments between rounds. He never answered it. He kept training. A title shot was promised, then delayed. Promised again, then taken away. Weight cuts failed. Fights fell apart. Opponents changed. Circumstances shifted. Khabib learned patience all over again. The setbacks were not loud, but they were heavy. Each delay tested discipline in a new way. It is easy to train when there is a date. It is harder when there is uncertainty. Still, he showed up every day, breathing slowly, repeating the same work, trusting that consistency would carry him through. In April 2018, the moment finally arrived. The belt was vacant. The fight was scheduled. The opportunity was real. Khabib trained with precision, not urgency. He did not chase emotion. He chased readiness. His father watched every session, correcting small details, reminding him that titles were not won on fight night, but in the weeks no one saw. The night of the fight, the arena felt electric. Fans filled the seats, waiting for a new champion. Khabib walked calmly, his face unchanged, his breath steady. When the cage door closed, the waiting ended. The fight was complete control. Takedowns came easily. Pressure never stopped. The opponent fought bravely, but could not escape. Round after round, Khabib dictated everything: pace, position, direction, outcome. When the referee stopped the fight, the crowd exploded. Khabib was champion. He dropped to the mat and closed his eyes. Not in celebration, but in relief. Years of work had finally taken shape. A belt was wrapped around his waist, heavy and real. Later, backstage, his father hugged him quietly. This was not an ending. It was the beginning of carrying something heavier than pressure. It was the beginning of responsibility. Being champion changes the way time feels. For Khabib, the days after winning the belt moved slowly, as if the world itself was adjusting to the idea. The noise grew louder, the attention heavier. Interviews filled his schedule. Cameras followed him everywhere. People spoke his name with expectation now, not curiosity. He accepted it calmly, but he did not absorb it. Back in Dagestan, training resumed the same way it always had. The gym was unchanged. The mats were warm. The air still smelled of effort. His father stood nearby, watching, correcting, reminding him that the belt did not make him better. It only made him visible. Khabib defended the title the only way he knew how: preparation without emotion. The next challenger was experienced, dangerous, confident. Analysts debated strategy. Fans argued online. Khabib stayed silent. He trained harder, longer, and more patiently than before. On fight night, the cage closed and the world narrowed again. The challenger came forward aggressively, trying to break the champion's rhythm. It did not work. Khabib slowed the fight, dragged it into deep water, and finished it the way he always did, with control, not chaos. The belt stayed with him. Each defense made the responsibility heavier. Being champion meant setting the example, not just winning fights. Young fighters watched him now, copied him, tried to understand how he stayed so calm. He never explained. He showed them. In 2019, the challenges grew bigger, the names more famous. The division looked to him for answers. He gave the same one every time: pressure, patience, discipline. His father remained by his side even as his health began to fade. The training camps were quieter now, the lessons shorter, but every word carried weight. Khabib listened closely, storing them carefully. When he defended the belt again, he did not celebrate. He thanked his father, thanked his team, and returned home. There were no parades, no distractions, only work, because carrying the title was not about standing above others. It was about standing firm while the world tried to pull you apart. And Khabib stood firm. By the time 2018 turned into 2019, Khabib was no longer just a champion. He was a symbol. People did not watch him to see who would win. They watched to see how long someone could survive. His style had become a question no one could answer, a pressure no one could escape. And still, the world wanted something louder, something more dramatic. That was when the noise began to grow. A rivalry formed, not from sport, but from chaos. Words turned into headlines. Insults turned personal. The fight became bigger than the cage, bigger than the belt. It followed Khabib everywhere, even into training rooms where silence once lived. His father warned him. "This fight is dangerous," he said, "not because of the man, because of the noise." So Khabib trained harder than ever, but differently. He trained to stay calm. He trained to stay inside himself. He trained to protect the discipline that had carried him this far. Fight night came like a storm. The arena was louder than anything he had ever experienced. The crowd was split, screaming, waiting, desperate for something to break. Khabib walked forward without expression, but inside, the pressure was heavier than it had ever been. The cage door closed. The fight was violent, fast, and emotional. His opponent attacked early, trying to pull him into chaos. Khabib absorbed it, adjusted, and waited. When the opening came, he took it, dragging the fight to the ground where silence lived. Round by round, control returned. And when the fight ended, when the belt was still his, something inside him snapped free. Emotion surged where discipline usually lived. The noise spilled over. The moment exploded beyond the cage. The world saw it as chaos. Khabib saw it as failure. That night, long after the arena emptied, he sat alone and breathed. The belt lay nearby, but it felt heavy in a way it never had before. He had won the fight, but he had lost control of the moment. And that mattered more than the world could understand. As Khabib carried the belt into 2018, the world around him began to change. It was no longer satisfied with dominance alone. People wanted drama. They wanted noise. They wanted a story louder than discipline. And slowly, that story began to form around a fight that had not yet happened. The opponent was famous, unpredictable, and unafraid of chaos. Words were thrown before fists. Insults crossed lines that fighting usually respected. What began as promotion turned personal, and the noise grew louder than anything Khabib had faced before. For the first time, the storm arrived before the fight. Khabib felt it everywhere, in interviews, in headlines, in the way crowds reacted to his name. The calm he had carried for years was tested not by punches, but by distraction. His father noticed immediately. "This fight is dangerous," Abdulmanap said. "Not because of the man, because of the noise." So training changed. They worked less on strength and more on stillness. less on speed and more on patience. The goal was not just to win, but to remain himself while the world tried to pull him away from everything he had built. Khabib trained in silence whenever possible. Early mornings, late nights, long sessions without music or cameras. He returned to the basics again and again, reminding his body of what mattered when everything else tried to interfere. The closer the fight came, the louder the world became. Fans argued. Media followed him everywhere. The fight became something bigger than sport, something heavy with emotion and expectation. Khabib said little, but inside he carried the weight. When fight night arrived, the arena was electric. The noise was overwhelming, the crowd split, the tension sharp enough to feel in the air. This was not just a championship fight. It was a moment the world had been waiting to release. Khabib walked to the cage calmly, but the storm followed him inside. The fight was fast, violent, chaotic. His opponent attacked early, trying to pull him into disorder. For a moment, the chaos felt close. But then Khabib did what he had always done. He slowed it down. He closed the distance. He brought the fight to the ground. And there, the noise disappeared. Round by round, control returned. Pressure replaced anger. Discipline replaced chaos. When the fight ended, the belt remained with him. But the storm did not stop. Emotion spilled beyond the cage. The moment broke open in ways he could not contain. The night became unforgettable for the world, and unforgettable for him for a different reason. Later, when everything was quiet again, Khabib sat alone and breathed. He had won the fight, but something had been lost, and he knew the mountains would expect him to find it again. When the night finally ended, it did not feel like victory. The arena emptied slowly, the noise fading in layers, like waves retreating from shore. Khabib sat alone in the quiet, his body still warm from the fight, his mind heavier than it had ever been. The belt lay nearby, but he did not look at it. The world was already speaking. Headlines spread faster than sleep. Opinions filled the air. Some praised him, some blamed him. Most simply watched the moment repeat itself again and again on screens. Khabib avoided all of it. He returned to Dagestan and disappeared into the mountains where the noise could not follow. Training resumed quietly. There were no cameras, no interviews, no questions. Just the gym, the mats, and the slow rhythm of work. His father watched closely, saying little, but his silence carried meaning. The lesson was clear without words. Control must exist everywhere, not only in the cage. Khabib felt the truth of it. For the first time, he understood how thin the line was between discipline and emotion. The fight had been won, but the calm had been shaken. And calm, he knew, was everything. Days passed, then weeks. The noise of the world slowly faded, replaced by the familiar sounds of training. Breath, movement, effort. The routine healed him the way it always had, bringing order back where chaos had tried to settle. When he returned to fight again, it was with renewed patience. The performance was clean, controlled, unmistakable. There was no anger, no urgency, no distraction. Only the quiet dominance the world had come to recognize. Afterward, he spoke softly about respect, about family, about responsibility. He did not mention the storm. He did not explain the past. He moved forward. But something had changed. The belt felt heavier now, not because of pressure, but because of meaning. It was no longer just a symbol of victory. It was a reminder of balance, of restraint, of the work required to stay whole. And as he trained, as he repeated the same movements he had practiced since childhood, Khabib understood that the greatest challenge ahead was not another opponent. It was maintaining the calm that had once come so easily. And the mountains, watching quietly as they always had, waited to see if he could. The year 2020 arrived quietly, but it carried weight. Fights were postponed, gyms closed, Travel stopped. The world, for the first time in Khabib's life, slowed down on its own. What discipline had taught him for years, the world was now being forced to learn. Khabib returned home. Dagestan felt familiar, steady, unchanged. The mountains still stood where they always had. The air still carried the same silence. For a while, the calm felt like relief. Training became simpler. Runs through open land. Basic drills. Long walks with his father. But then the stillness turned heavy. Abdulmanap fell ill. At first, it felt unreal, like a temporary pause that would soon pass. Khabib stayed close, canceling plans, ignoring calls, letting the world wait. Training became secondary. Family came first. The illness worsened. Hospitals replaced gyms. Waiting replaced movement. The discipline that once guided everything now had no direction. Khabib sat in silence, breathing slowly, doing the only thing he could do. When the news came, it arrived without mercy. His father was gone. Time stopped completely. The man who had shaped every part of his life, who had built the system, the discipline, the routine, the calm, was no longer there to watch. The mountains felt empty. The gym felt hollow. The world felt far away. Khabib did not speak for days. When he did, his voice was quiet. He returned home and stayed there, walking the same paths he had walked as a child, listening to the same wind, breathing the same air. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was vast. The world asked questions. Khabib did not answer. He did not know if he would fight again. He did not know if he wanted to. The routine had been built for his father as much as for himself, and now it felt incomplete. One night, as he sat alone beneath the open sky, he remembered something Abdulmanap had once said. A man is not tested when things are hard. He is tested when they are empty. And in that emptiness, Khabib understood. If he returned, it would not be for the belt. It would not be for the crowd. It would not be for legacy. It would be for goodbye. The decision did not feel like motivation. It felt like peace. And for the first time since the loss, the world slowed down enough for him to breathe again. The decision stayed quiet, but it stayed firm. Khabib did not announce it to the world. He did not explain it. He simply returned to training, not with urgency, but with intention. This camp was different from everyone before it. There was no voice correcting him now, no shadow watching from the corner of the room. The discipline had to come from inside, and it did. Each morning began the same way it always had. Slow breath, steady movement, simple work. The routine felt heavier, but also clearer. There was nothing left to chase, only something left to finish. He trained with his team, with Islam, with the young fighters who looked at him the way he once looked at his father. He corrected them gently, the same way Abdulmanap had corrected him. Without anger, without pride. Just truth. The fight was announced. The world reacted instantly. Questions returned. Cameras followed. People wondered if grief had weakened him, if time had changed him, if this would finally be the night he lost. Khabib ignored it all. On fight night, the arena was quieter than he expected, not in sound, but in feeling. The noise no longer reached him. He walked forward calmly, carrying nothing but breath and memory. When the cage door closed, everything felt familiar. The opponent was strong, prepared, confident. But confidence fades when patience does not. Khabib waited, pressed, controlled. He did not rush. He did not waste. Every movement felt like it belonged exactly where it was. On the ground, the fight slowed to the pace he had learned as a child. Pressure, balance, breath. The world narrowed to a single moment that stretched endlessly. When the submission came, it came quietly. The tap was soft. The referee stepped in. The fight was over. Khabib fell to his knees. This time, he did not look to the crowd. He did not look for cameras. He looked down, pressed his forehead to the mat, and breathed. The tears came without resistance. They carried grief, gratitude, relief, and farewell, all at once. When he stood, the belt was placed around his waist again. He did not lift it. He did not show it. He simply held it for a moment, then handed it away. Later, in the quiet, he spoke words he had already decided. This was his last fight. He had made a promise, and now it was kept. The cage that had carried him through his life released him gently. And for the first time, Khabib felt truly finished. Retirement did not feel like an ending. It felt like silence returning to its place. Khabib left the arena that night without ceremony, without celebration, without hesitation. The world talked endlessly about legacy, about greatness, about numbers and records, but he did not listen. He had already stepped away in his mind long before he stepped away in public. When he returned to Dagestan, the mountains greeted him the same way they always had. They did not care about belts. They did not care about wins. They did not care about fame. They cared only that he had come home. Days passed slowly. Mornings began without urgency. There was no weight cut to prepare for, no opponent to study, no camp schedule to follow. For the first time in his life, Khabib woke up with nothing demanded of him, and yet the routine remained. He still ran in the mornings, still trained in the gym, still corrected young fighters quietly from the corner of the room. Discipline did not disappear when fighting ended. It had become part of him, deeper than profession, deeper than identity. The gym filled with young men who wanted to learn. Some wanted to be champions. Some just wanted structure. Khabib gave them the same thing his father had given him: patience, control, consistency. He did not raise his voice. He did not give long speeches. He demonstrated everything through repetition, through presence, through example. Slowly, he realized he was becoming what Abdulmanap had been: not a fighter, a guide. The belt no longer hung in the gym. It rested somewhere quiet, unseen, unimportant. What mattered now was what would continue when he was no longer there to show it. In the evenings, Khabib walked alone through the same land he had run as a boy. The air felt lighter. The silence felt complete. He breathed deeply, feeling the weight of years lift from his shoulders. The cage was gone from his life, but the discipline remained, and that was enough. The gym no longer belonged to him alone. Every morning, young fighters arrived early, carrying hope the same way Khabib once had, quietly, carefully, unsure of how heavy it would become. They tied their laces, stretched in silence, and waited for instruction that never came loudly. Khabib watched. He saw himself in their impatience, in their hunger to prove something before they had built anything. He did not rush to correct them. He let them work, let them struggle, let them feel the weight of their own mistakes. That was how his father had taught him. When he spoke, it was softly. When he corrected, it was precise. When he praised, it was brief. Discipline, he knew, did not need decoration. Islam Makhachev trained beside him now, no longer a student, but a man stepping into his own path. Khabib watched Islam the way his father had once watched him, quietly, constantly, with care that never needed words. He guided him through camps, through doubts, through moments when pressure tried to break rhythm. And it worked. Victories came. Growth came. Confidence came slowly, the right way. Khabib felt something shift inside him, a different kind of pride. Not the sharp kind that came from winning, but the steady kind that came from building. He understood now why his father had loved coaching more than fighting. In the evenings, after the gym emptied, Khabib often stayed behind. He cleaned the mats. He straightened the room. He sat in silence and breathed. The gym felt alive again, filled not with his own ambition, but with the future of others. He was no longer chasing perfection. He was protecting it. And as the mountains darkened outside, standing patient and unmoved, Khabib felt something he had not felt in years. Peace, the kind that comes only when you are exactly where you are meant to be. Time moves differently now. Days pass without urgency, without countdowns, without the sharp edge of competition. Khabib wakes early out of habit, not necessity. The sun rises over the mountains the same way it always has, slow and patient, as if it never noticed the world change at all. His life is quieter, but fuller. Mornings are spent walking the land, feeling the ground beneath his feet, listening to the wind move through stone. Training still happens, but it is lighter now, purposeful without pressure. He trains to stay strong, to stay clear, to stay connected to the discipline that shaped him. The world still calls him a champion. He does not answer. Instead, he watches his students. He sees their small improvements, the moments when something finally clicks. A better grip, a calmer breath, a decision not to rush. These are victories now, quieter but deeper. Sometimes people ask if he misses fighting. Khabib smiles politely and shakes his head. Fighting was never the point. Becoming was. In the evenings, he sits with family, sharing meals without hurry, without checking time. These moments were once rare, stolen between camps and travel. Now they are daily, steady, grounding. The noise of the world feels far away. The belt rests somewhere unseen. It no longer needs to be displayed. Its work is done. When Khabib thinks of his father, it is no longer with pain, but with gratitude. The lessons live on in every choice he makes, in every correction he gives, in every calm breath he takes when others rush. The mountains remain unchanged. They watched him leave. They watched him return. They watched him become something else entirely. And in their silence, Khabib understands the final lesson. Victory is not what you take from the world. It is what you leave behind. As night settles gently over Dagestan, the land grows quiet again. The wind softens. The stars appear, steady and endless. Khabib breathes slowly. The story is complete. And the mountains rest. The world still tries to reach him. Invitations arrive from distant places. Cameras ask for his time. Voices want opinions, reactions, explanations. But Khabib moves differently now. He chooses carefully what he lets inside his days. Most of the time, he chooses quiet. Life after fighting is not empty. It is wide. The hours stretch longer, softer, more forgiving. He fills them with simple things. Training, teaching, walking, listening. The same things he did as a boy, only now without urgency. He travels sometimes, but always returns. Dagestan pulls him back the way gravity pulls stone. The land feels like memory made solid. It reminds him who he was before the world learned his name, and who he still is when the world forgets it. In the gym, his presence is calm. Fighters approach him with questions, with doubts, with fear. He answers the same way his father once did, slowly, honestly, without rushing them to understand. You have time, he tells them. Use it. He watches their fights from the corner, hands folded, eyes steady. He does not shout. He does not panic. He trusts the work they have done. When they lose, he does not scold. When they win, he does not celebrate. He corrects, and then he moves on. The discipline continues its quiet journey from one generation to the next. At home, life is full in ways it never was before. Meals are longer. Conversations linger. Laughter comes easily. These moments used to be rare, fragile, easily broken by training camps and flights. Now they are strong and ordinary. And ordinary, he has learned, is a gift. Some nights, he sits outside and watches the sky darken over the mountains. The same stars appear. The same wind moves. Time feels slower here, kinder. He breathes deeply, feeling the calm that once lived only inside the cage, now living everywhere. The spotlight fades naturally, the way light always does when the sun goes down, and Khabib does not follow it. He stays where the silence is, where the work continues, where the mountains still remember his name. Legacy is a word Khabib rarely uses. It feels too loud, too polished, too full of other people's opinions. Yet he can feel it in small ways now, in moments that arrive without warning, in the way young fighters straighten when he enters a room, in the way coaches listen when he speaks, in the way his name is mentioned softly, with respect, in places far from Dagestan. Legacy is not something he chases. It is something that follows. When he watches Islam step into the cage, calm and prepared, Khabib sees more than a fighter. He sees the system working. He sees mornings in cold air, long runs, endless drills, quiet corrections. He sees his father's lessons moving forward without needing his voice. And that is enough. The gym is full most days now. Fighters come from different countries, different backgrounds, different reasons. Some want belts, some want structure, some just want direction. Khabib gives them the same thing every time: work, patience, time. He reminds them that greatness is not a moment. It is a habit. That talent fades if discipline does not carry it. That calm is stronger than aggression, and consistency outlasts excitement. Many know it. Few truly understand, but understanding is not required. Only repetition is. In the evenings, when the gym is empty and the mats are quiet, Khabib walks slowly through the room. He remembers sleeping there as a child, listening to fighters breathe, watching his father teach late into the night. The memory no longer hurts. It steadies him. Sometimes he sits alone and reflects on the life he lived. 29 fights, 29 wins, no losses. The world will remember that. But Khabib remembers something else. The mornings when he did not want to get up, but did. The days when he wanted to quit, but stayed. The moments when silence was the hardest thing to hold. That is the legacy he cares about, not the record. The example. Outside, the mountains stand the same way they always have, patient and unmoved. They do not measure time in years or achievements. They measure it in endurance, in staying. Khabib understands now that his life was never meant to be loud. It was meant to be steady. A long, quiet line of discipline stretching from one generation to the next. And in that stillness, his legacy feels complete. Not finished, but secure. And as the night deepens, the world grows quieter again, exactly the way he prefers it. There comes a time when a man stops moving forward and begins to circle back. For Khabib, that time arrives gently, without announcement, the way most important things do. He finds himself walking the same paths he once ran as a boy, feeling the same uneven ground beneath his feet, breathing the same thin air that once burned his lungs. The mountains have not changed. They are still patient, still silent, still watching. Khabib moves slowly now, not because he is tired, but because there is no reason to hurry. The land does not rush him. The wind does not ask anything of him. He walks, and that is enough. Sometimes he returns to Sildi, the village where his life began. The roads are quiet, the houses small, the air filled with memory. He stands for a moment, looking at the place where everything started, and feels no need to say anything. The story is already written here. He visits old gyms, small rooms with worn mats and cracked walls, places where discipline was born before anyone called it greatness. Young boys train there now, laughing between rounds, full of energy and impatience. Khabib watches quietly, smiling at the way they rush, knowing time will slow them soon enough. When they ask him questions, he answers simply: train, rest, repeat. They want secrets. He gives them habits. At home, his days are full of small rituals. Tea in the morning, training in the afternoon, long walks in the evening. The routine is softer now, but it is still there, holding everything together. He no longer thinks of his life as chapters or fights or victories. It feels like one long breath that finally found its natural rhythm. The pressure is gone. The noise has faded. Only the work remains. And the work he has learned never truly ends. At night, when the sky stretches wide and the stars appear one by one, Khabib lies back and listens to the land. The same silence that raised him now carries him gently toward rest. The mountains remember him, not as a champion, not as an undefeated fighter, but as a boy who learned how to stay. And in that remembering, everything feels complete. Without trying, Khabib becomes a presence that steadies others. Fighters listen more carefully when he speaks. Coaches pause when he enters a room. Even people who have never trained feel something calm settle when he is near. It is not authority. It is not fame. It is the result of a life lived without rushing. He spends more time observing now than correcting, watching how young fighters react when things go wrong, watching how they breathe when pressure rises. He sees the same mistakes again and again, the rush, the panic, the need to prove something too quickly. He lets them learn. When he does speak, it is often after training, when sweat has cooled and minds are open. His words are few, chosen carefully. Slow down. Breathe. Stay. These are not instructions. They are reminders. Khabib travels occasionally to corners of the world he once fought in. The arenas look smaller now. The noise feels distant. He sits in the crowd sometimes unnoticed, watching others step into the cage. He feels no pull to return. The work he needed to do there is finished. In quiet moments, he reflects on how strange it is that a life once filled with constant motion now feels fuller in stillness. He does not miss the fights. He misses the simplicity of preparation, the clarity of purpose. And so he keeps that clarity alive through routine. Morning runs, simple meals, time in the gym, evenings with family. This is the discipline his father wanted him to learn. Not how to win fights, but how to live without chaos. The world still speaks his name. Articles are written. Videos are replayed. Debates continue. Khabib hears none of it unless someone brings it to him. Fame fades naturally when it is not fed, and he does not feed it. As the nights grow deeper and quieter, he finds comfort in the fact that influence does not need attention to exist. It moves quietly, like the mountains, shaping everything around it simply by being there. Khabib breathes slowly, listening to the wind outside his home. The same wind that once pushed a boy forward now carries a man gently toward rest. And the world, at last, feels calm enough to sleep. There is a moment, after a long journey, when a man finally realizes he has arrived, not at a place, but at himself. For Khabib, that moment comes in the ordinary hours of the day, in the space between training and rest, between teaching and listening. The fighter he once was feels distant now, like a story told long ago, remembered but no longer lived. He is still strong, still disciplined, still calm. But now he is also light. He wakes without pressure, trains without expectation, moves through the day without needing to prove anything. The discipline that once pushed him forward now holds him steady, like an anchor in deep water. When people ask him who he is now, he does not answer with titles. He is a son, a husband, a father, a teacher. These roles feel heavier than any belt, but they also feel right. In the evenings, he sits with his family, listening more than speaking. He watches his children move through the house, full of energy and curiosity. And he understands something his father once understood, that the greatest responsibility is not raising champions, but raising people who know how to stay calm in a loud world. He teaches them the same way he teaches fighters, with patience, with consistency, with presence, no rush, no anger. No fear. Sometimes when the night is quiet and the mountains are dark silhouettes against the sky, Khabib steps outside and breathes deeply. The air still feels the same. Thin, clean, honest. It carries no noise, no expectations, no demands, only space. The man beyond the fighter is not empty. He is complete. And as the stars settle into their places, steady and unchanged, Khabib feels the same quiet certainty he felt as a boy. He is exactly where he is supposed to be, and there is nothing left to chase. Night in Dagestan arrives slowly, like a blanket being pulled gently across the land. The mountains fade into shadow, their edges softening until they become shapes of memory rather than stone. The air cools, the wind slows, and silence, deep and complete, settles where noise once lived. Khabib welcomes this hour more than any other. The day's work is finished. The gym is empty. The world has stopped asking for anything. He steps outside and stands still, breathing in the cold air that feels unchanged from the mornings of his childhood. This is the silence that raised him. He walks the land slowly, feeling the ground beneath his feet, remembering the boy who once ran these paths with burning lungs and unbroken focus. That boy could not see the end of the road. He only knew to keep moving. Now, Khabib sees the road clearly. It does not stretch forward anymore. It circles gently, returning him to where everything began. The work continues, but it is lighter now, shared, passed on, no longer carried alone. He thinks of his father, not with grief, but with calm. The lessons were never meant to stay in one place. They were meant to travel, to live on in others, to become part of the land itself. And they have. The gym is full. The discipline is alive. The silence is steady. As the stars appear one by one, Khabib sits, then lets the night surround him. There is no hurry to go inside, no reason to move. The mountains have been waiting for him his entire life, and now he has the time to wait with them. Breath slows, thoughts fade, the world rests. Tomorrow will come, as it always has, quiet and patient. And when it does, Khabib will rise, not as a fighter, not as a champion, but as a man at peace. The mountains watch over him, and in their silence, the story finally sleeps. Morning comes without sound. Light moves gently across the mountains, touching stone and valley the way it has for centuries. The land wakes slowly, without urgency, without demand. Khabib opens his eyes and breathes in the cold air, feeling the same calm he has felt since he was a boy. There is nothing to prepare for today, nothing to prove, nothing to chase. The silence remains. He steps outside and stands still for a moment, listening to the wind move through the hills. It carries no noise now, no pressure, no expectations. Only space, only time. This is what all the work was for. Not the belt, not the fights, not the record. This, a life that does not rush, a mind that does not shake, a body that listens instead of demands. He walks the same paths he once ran, but now his steps are slow, measured, unhurried. The ground feels familiar beneath his feet, as if it remembers him too. Every stone, every curve of the land, every rise and fall holds a piece of his story. The mountains do not speak, but they do not need to. They have watched everything. The boy who trained before dawn, the young man who left home, the fighter who carried discipline into chaos, the man who returned and laid it all down. And now they watch him rest. Khabib sits, closes his eyes, and breathes deeply. The rhythm is steady, the same rhythm he learned from his father, the same rhythm he taught others, the same rhythm that will continue long after he is gone. The world feels far away now, like a dream already fading. There is nothing left to hold on to, only breath, only stillness, only peace. And as the sun climbs higher and the land warms gently, the story settles into silence, Where it was always meant to end, the mountains remain, and so does the calm. Days begin to blend together in a way they never could before. Morning arrives, and Khabib rises without thinking. His body still knows the hour, still knows the rhythm. There is no alarm, no schedule waiting, but the habit remains steady and gentle. He steps outside and breathes in the cold air, feeling the quiet settle in his chest. The same walk, the same path, the same silence. He moves through the morning slowly, unhurried. Tea warms his hands. The land wakes around him. Birds move softly between trees. The mountains stand unchanged, watching without expectation. Later, the gym opens, not with noise, but with movement. Fighters arrive one by one, tying shoes, stretching, speaking softly. Khabib watches from the side at first, letting the session unfold. He does not interrupt. He observes the way his father once did. When he steps onto the mat, the room settles. Training flows in long, patient waves. Drills repeat. Breath slows. Bodies learn to move without tension. There is no rush to finish, no urgency to impress. The rhythm of work becomes the rhythm of the day itself. Sometimes he joins them. Sometimes he only watches. Both feel the same now. The discipline no longer needs effort. It exists naturally, like breathing. Afternoons are quiet. He eats simply, rests briefly, walks again. The land looks different in the afternoon light, softer, warmer. The hills hold the sun longer. Shadows stretch. Time feels wide, generous. In the evenings, the gin empties and silence returns. Khabib sits alone for a moment, listening to the echo of the day fade. He does not think of tomorrow. He does not think of the past. He stays exactly where he is. This is the rhythm now. Wake, move, teach, rest, reteach. Days pass this way. Weeks, months, nothing dramatic happens. And that is the beauty of it. Life no longer rises and falls with fights or dates or noise. It moves like the mountains move, slowly, steadily, without asking permission. And in that rhythm, Khabib finds something deeper than victory. He finds peace that lasts. The gym fills more quickly now. Word travels in quiet ways. From one fighter to another, from one coach to the next. People come not for fame, but for structure. They come because something about this place feels different. Slower, clearer, steadier. Khabib welcomes them without ceremony. He does not speak about his career. He does not tell stories unless asked. When he teaches, it is always through repetition, through watching, through doing the same simple things until they become part of the body. Islam Makhachev trains nearby, moving with the same calm that once defined Khabib's own fights. Khabib watches him closely, guiding without controlling, letting him grow into his own rhythm. He knows now that teaching is not about shaping someone into yourself, but about helping them find themselves. Young fighters struggle, as they always do. They rush, they tense, they waste energy. Khabib lets them feel it before he corrects it. Slow down, he says quietly. Breathe. Stay. They nod, but the lesson takes time. It always has. In the evenings, Khabib sits with them sometimes, sharing tea, listening to their worries, their hopes, their impatience. He does not offer answers. He offers perspective. Time is your friend, he tells them. If you don't fight it. They leave calmer than they arrived, carrying a little of the silence with them. Outside the gym, the world still moves fast. Fights happen. Titles change hands. Noise continues. But inside these walls, the pace is different. The discipline of the mountains has found a new home. Khabib watches the next generation grow stronger, steadier, more patient. And in those moments, he feels his father's presence most clearly. Not behind him, but moving forward, alive in every lesson that is passed on. The work continues. And it is enough. Seasons pass without announcement. Summer gives way to autumn. Autumn softens into winter. Snow covers the paths where Khabib once ran, turning the land into quiet white stillness. The cold air sharpens the breath, slows the body, invites rest. Khabib moves with the seasons now. In winter, training is shorter, softer. Long walks replace long runs. Stretching replaces pressure. He teaches more and moves less, letting the young fighters carry the energy while he carries the calm. When spring arrives, the land opens again. Snow melts. Rivers swell. The ground softens beneath his feet. He walks the hills slowly, feeling the return of warmth, the return of motion, a steady pulse of life beginning again. The land teaches without words. It reminds him that effort and rest belong together, that nothing can push forever, that strength is not constant force, but constant return. In the evenings, he sits outside and breathes. The air changes with each season, but the rhythm does not. Slow in, slow out. The same breath he learned as a child, the same breath he carried into the cage, the same breath he now carries into stillness. He watches the stars appear in winter's sharp sky, in summer's wide darkness. The sky is always the same, no matter how the world below changes. That comforts him. The mountains hold everything. They held the boy. They held the fighter. They hold the man. And in their presence, the breath becomes deeper, slower, heavier, pulling the body gently toward rest. The land does not hurry, and neither does he. Night settles gently over Dagestan, the way it always has. The mountains darken first, their outlines softening until they are shapes made of memory rather than stone. The wind slows. The air cools. Silence spreads across the land like water, finding its level. Khabib steps outside and stands still. There is nothing to do, nothing to prepare for, nothing waiting beyond this moment. He breathes in slowly, feeling the air fill his chest, then leave again just as slowly. The rhythm is familiar. It has been with him since childhood, through training, through fights, through loss, through return. It is the only rhythm that never changed. The world feels far away now. The noise that once chased him has faded into distance, like a dream already slipping from memory. There are no crowds here, no lights, no questions, only the land, the night, and the quiet certainty of being home. He walks a short distance, feeling the ground beneath his feet. Each step is unhurried. Each breath is deep. The path leads nowhere in particular, and that is exactly the point. When he stops, he sits and lets the stillness settle fully. The mountains remain. They have seen everything. The boy waking before dawn, the young man leaving home, the fighter carrying discipline into chaos, the man returning with nothing left to prove. They hold the story without judgment, without urgency, without sound. Khabib closes his eyes. The breath slows. The body softens. Thoughts fade the way stars fade when morning comes, one by one, quietly, without resistance. There is no ending here. Only rest, only calm. Only the silence that was always waiting.